Welcome back to CIA Declassified. We're trading our trench coats for spacesuits. We've looked at spies in the jungle and cybernetic dogs in the lab, but now we're going to look at a plan so ambitious, so expensive, and so incredibly Cold War that it makes most sci fi movies look like a budget documentary. We're examining Project Horizon. The year is 1959. The space race is just heating up, and the U.S. Army, not NASA, mind you, but the Army, decides that the Earth just isn't big enough for their ambitions. They submitted a massive multi volume report to the White House and the CIA detailing how to build a military fortress on the moon. Why? Because in the world of strategy, whoever holds the high ground wins, and you can't get much higher than 238,000 miles up. This wasn't just a sketch on a napkin. The Army had a timeline. They wanted a base operational by 1966. The Project Horizon report proposed using Saturn rockets to ferry 245 tons of construction material to the lunar surface. The plan included a permanent garrison of 12 soldiers living in pressurized cylinders buried under the lunar soil to protect them from radiation and, wait for it, Soviet moon to moon attacks. The base was to be powered by two nuclear reactors. The Army's blueprints even included the Lunar Claymore, a modified version of the anti personnel mine designed to work in a vacuum to repel enemy boarders. A quote from the Project Horizon Volume 1. The lunar outpost is required to develop and protect United States interests on the moon, to develop techniques in moon-based surveillance of Earth and space, and to serve as a base for exploration, end quote. The estimated cost in 1959 was $6 billion. In today's money, that's a staggering $53 billion. The CIA was tasked with reviewing this plan to see if it was actually feasible or if the Army had simply watched too many episodes of Flash Gordon. The CIA's analyst expressed extreme concern over the security of supply lines. Their declassified memos point out that a base on the moon is effectively a hostage situation if the Soviets developed a way to intercept the ferry rockets. The Army's plan actually suggested that the moon could be used for nuclear detection. By placing sensors on the lunar surface, they believed they could detect any Soviet nuclear test on Earth with 100% accuracy. A quote from the CIA Office of Scientific Intelligence. While the technical requirements are within the realm of future possibility, the political and psychological implications of a nuclear armed lunar base may provoke a preemptive strike by the adversary. End quote. Project Horizon proposed the use of lunar rovers equipped with machine guns. This was 10 years before the Apollo program even put a man on the moon, yet the Army was already designing lunar tank battles. One volume of the report focused entirely on lunar law. The CIA reviewed whether the U.S. could legally claim the moon as territory under existing international maritime laws. The conclusion? It was a legal Wild West. The Army's strategy included the deployment of a space-to-space defense system. Declassified documents show they planned to use modified Nike Zeus missiles launched from the moon to intercept any Soviet spacecraft attempting to approach the American lunar sector. Project Horizon was planned to be constructed in the Mare Imbrium region. The Army chose the Sea of Rains not for its scenery, but because the flat terrain was ideal for the massive rocket landings required to ferry the 147 needed construction launches. A quote from the Project Horizon Task Force. Control of the moon will decide the control of the Earth. We cannot allow a Sputnik of the lunar surface to occur. The first nation to achieve a permanent lunar presence will dictate the terms of planetary security, end quote. The project designers intended to use a lunar pile driver. This was a specialized piece of equipment designed to sink the base's foundations deep into the regolith to ensure the pressurized living quarters wouldn't pop out of the ground due to the internal atmospheric pressure. The Army actually planned for lunar infantry training at high altitude sites on Earth. They wanted to stimulate the psychological isolation and physical constraints of moon base life years before the first astronaut ever entered a centrifuge. Even though much of Horizon is public now, the CIA's specific intelligence reviews still have some massive black bars. The heaviest redactions occur in the section titled Electronic Intelligence from the Lunar Surface. Speculation by historians suggests the CIA was looking into using the moon as a giant blackboard to bounce radio signals and eavesdrop on Soviet communications, a technique called moon bounce. The blacked out text likely hides the specific frequencies the CIA already knew how to intercept. Further speculation surrounds the offensive capabilities section. While the Army talked about claymores, there is a conspiracy theory that the redacted pages detail a plan for rod from God weapons, dropping massive tungsten poles from the moon to strike targets on Earth with the force of a nuclear bomb, but without the fallout. There is a persistent rumor, strictly speculation, that the CIA's review included a psychological assessment of space-induced insanity. Some believe the redacted portions discuss the agency's fear that soldiers isolated on the moon would eventually lose loyalty to Earthside Command, creating an independent lunar state. Conspiracy theorists often point to the Soviet reaction chapters. The speculation is that the CIA already had human intelligence, suggesting the Russians were already building their own base, and the redacted text contains the locations of suspected Soviet lunar dig sites. Some believe the redactions hide a Phase 2 plan involving the moon as a nuclear archive. The theory is that the CIA wanted to store a seed bank of human knowledge and top-secret agency files on the moon in case of a total nuclear exchange on Earth. There's also speculation that the redactions hide a secret partnership with former Nazi scientists. While Werner von Braun was public, the theory is that more morally gray scientists were involved in the life support systems, and the CIA didn't want their names surfacing. Finally, some speculate that the redactions hide the true reason the project was canceled, that the CIA discovered something already on the moon during early telescopic surveillance, but will leave the aliens to the other shows. For now. A common conspiracy theory regarding the heavy redactions in the nuclear power section is that the CIA planned to use the moon as a testing ground for Project Orion style propulsion, literally detonating nuclear bombs behind a spacecraft to push it through space. The speculation is that the environmental impact on the lunar surface was too controversial to ever go public. There is speculation that the redacted communications chapter details a plan to install a massive telescope on the far side of the moon to spy on deep space Soviet satellites, bypassing the atmospheric interference of Earth. Some believe this tech was actually built and remains there, hidden from civilian astronomers. Conspiracy theorists often suggest the personnel redactions hide a plan to use untraceable labor, specifically prisoners or disappeared persons, for the initial high-risk construction phase of the base, ensuring that if a rocket exploded, there would be no official American casualties to report. So, did we get our moon base? Obviously, no. Project Horizon was officially scrapped when President Eisenhower decided to hand the space mission to a civilian agency, NASA. The CIA's cold hard assessment was a major factor. They concluded that the cost-to-benefit ratio was insane and that it would likely trigger World War III before the first brick was laid. A quote from CIA Director Alan Dulles. "The proposal is a masterpiece of imagination but a nightmare of logistics. Our focus must remain on the Earth we have, not the moon we want," end quote. Despite being canceled, many of the technical specs for Horizon were quietly transferred to the Apollo program. The Saturn V rocket that eventually took us to the moon, that was a direct descendant of the Horizon heavy lift requirements. The lunar mapping developed for Horizon became the primary source for NASA's early landing site selections. The Army's spies had already picked out the best real estate on the moon by 1960. A Quote from the Nazi Dr. Werner von Braun: "The military value of the moon is undeniable. It is the high ground of the 20th century. If we do not take it, others will." End quote. The Lunar Living modules designed for Project Horizon directly informed the design of the Skylab space station. The internal layouts of the way the Army planned to store oxygen and water were the biological blueprints for how humans survive in a vacuum today. A quote from Secretary of the Army Wilbur Brucker: "Project Horizon represents the next logical step in our national security. To ignore the lunar frontier is to cede the future to those who would do us harm." End quote. Project Horizon gave us the Star Wars tech decades before the movies, operational breakthroughs, heavy lift rocketry. The project pioneered the math for multi-stage launches that could carry tons, not just pounds. Closed-loop life support. The CIA's review of how to recycle air and water for 12 men led to the systems used in modern space stations today. Nuclear miniaturization. The requirement for a portable lunar reactor accelerated the development of compact nuclear power sources used in deep space probes. And space suit mobility. Early Army designs for moonwalking suits influenced the pressurized gear used by every astronaut since. Project Horizon remains the ultimate example of Cold War what if. It's the day the CIA looked at the moon and saw a fortress, and then wisely decided that maybe, just maybe, we should stick to spying on the ground. Thanks for listening, and join us next time. We're going to be coming back down to Earth with a splash. We're going to examine Operation Sea Spray. It's 1950, and the CIA and the Navy have a question. How vulnerable is an American city to a biological attack? To find out, they didn't use a lab. They used San Francisco. We'll look at the secret ship spraying bacteria into the fog and the real-world consequences for the people below. Join us for the fog of war. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.